The prosecution in the Sussmann trial says evidence proves the Clinton campaign lawyer is guilty of lying to the FBI. Court will resume on Tuesday, where a verdict could be read. Let's bring in Andy McCarthy, former chief assistant U.S. attorney and Fox News contributor. Andy, great to see you again.
Hi, David.
Now, defense attorneys for Sussmann claim that the case against Sussmann is all, and I'm quoting them here, smoke and mirrors. But it's very clear, is it not, that he brought to the FBI this phony evidence that was used for the next 3 years to dog the Trump administration. I mean, he was very much a part of that.
Yeah, I think, David, that it's fair to say that the proof shows, I thought beyond a reasonable doubt, that Sussmann lied. That is, that he gave false information when he said that he wasn't representing anyone when he brought this bogus information of a Trump-Russia back channel to the FBI. What the case is going to come down to, I believe, is did the lie make a difference? That is to say, there's a lot of evidence that came out in the last few days that the FBI knew exactly who they were dealing with Sussmann. They knew who he was, who his clients were. Remember, this is the guy who had represented the Democratic National Committee in connection with the hacking of its servers. So certainly the FBI knew who he was. And he gave them a cover story that he was only there as a good citizen, not on behalf of the Clintons. But the FBI acted certainly as if they knew they were handling explosive political information from a partisan source, and they seemed to have concealed his identity in the paperwork. They would have you believe that was to protect him as an informant. It looks like it was more to protect the FBI because they knew they were taking partisan political information.
Well, I'll talk about the FBI in a second, but again, to Sussmann himself, and you and I have talked about this before, but there is this text memo that was sent from Sussmann to the FBI general counsel, a guy named James Baker. And here it is. Jim, it's Michael Sussmann. I have something time sensitive I need to discuss. Do you have availability for a short meeting tomorrow? I'm coming on my own, not on behalf of a client or company. Want to help the Bureau. Thanks. Well, obviously it wasn't on his own. He was working for Hillary Clinton. We now know that Hillary signed off on this phony story about Alpha Bank being connected somehow to the Trump campaign. So that was a lie. But more than that, it was a key lie that was being presented by the Hillary Clinton campaign in order to win an election.
Yeah, I think the problem that the prosecution has with that piece of evidence, David, which is exactly as you're describing it, is they didn't have the text message at the time that they indicted the case. And when they did indict the case, ordinarily, if you didn't have evidence at the time of the indictment, it would be no big deal as a prosecutor. You just go back into the grand jury, supersede the indictment, add new charges. Durham's problem is he was flush up against the statute of limitations.
Right.
So he was beyond the point where he could supersede the indictment and change the charge. So the judge instructed the jury that they can't convict based on the text alone. In order to convict, they have to find that at the meeting the day after the text that Sussmann made the same representation. Yeah. Now, to my mind, there's no reason to think he wouldn't have. After all, he did send the text, the night before, less than 24 hours before the meeting. But that did not help Durham's case, for sure.
All right, let's talk about the FBI, because sometimes a trial is good at exposing something that doesn't necessarily have to do with the parties. And in this case, it's the FBI. What did this case expose to you, for one, about the way the FBI does business?
Well, I think the way they did business at this time was they enmeshed themselves into politics. Now, they know that that's a bad look for them, and they didn't want to be perceived as getting involved in politics. But it seems to me what happened here is they took information from somebody who they knew was a top Democratic operative. And even though he was telling them he came to them on his own, not on behalf of any client, they had every reason to suspect 6 weeks before the election, if you're taking information from a top Democratic lawyer who represents the Democratic National Committee and he wants to dump dirt on Donald Trump, but he's just doing that out of the goodness of his heart and as a great patriot, not for any political motive, if you're a good investigator, you're going to be skeptical about that.
Yes.
And yet the FBI took the investigation and the information, and headquarters would not tell the agents who they tasked to run this information down who the source was.
Well, Andy, what does that tell you? You don't have to be schooled in how to be an FBI agent to know that you can't do that. I mean, that tells me that they were directly political partisans that were deciding to do this. And there's, in my mind, there's no doubt that they were. That's particularly when you read the emails between Peter Strzok and his woman acquaintance from the FBI.
Yeah, Lisa Page. Well, you're exactly right about this. The artificial thing about this, David, is that we're looking at this trial as kind of in a vacuum, as if the Sussmann piece of this, the Alpha Bank piece, was the only piece. But we know that at the same time, they were preparing to go to the FISA court on the basis of the Steele dossier.
Yeah.
And they had just had a meeting where they talked about an insurance policy in case Donald Trump won. So, there's a lot of evidence of political bias, and there's a lot of evidence of very strange handling of information. And now, again, to underscore this, that doesn't mean that Sussmann is innocent. That doesn't mean that he didn't lie. But it becomes very difficult for the prosecution to prove a case when the FBI is acting like they're doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Andy, very quickly, because we're running out of time, but I want to switch gears to the Supreme Court and the Democrat efforts to tear it down. We had Senator Markey talk about it being an illegitimate court. I just want to play the soundbite and get your quick reaction. Roll tape.
We have to take very seriously the threat which an illegitimate, far-right Supreme Court poses to gun safety in our country. We have to expand the Supreme Court to get back the 2 stolen seats that the Republicans and Donald Trump took from the American people.
Andy, that's really third world rhetoric there, to call a Supreme Court something that's one of the real foundations of our democracy illegitimate, to suggest that seats were stolen. They did the same kind of rhetoric with abortion. Now they're doing it with gun control. I mean, where does this end up?
Well, it depends on who listens to him. I mean, I think he's a kind of a fringe bird brain. I don't know how much he resonates with the country. Obviously, the seats weren't stolen. If the Democrats had had the votes to get Merrick Garland confirmed, he'd be on the Supreme Court. They didn't have the votes. That's not theft. That's the Constitution. That's how it works.
Yeah, this kind of rhetoric is no place in a place like the United States of America. I mean, you hear it in Nicaragua and Venezuela and places like that, not here. I hope you're right about him being just the fringe of the party. Andy McCarthy, great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.